When I was 5, I got a budgie for Christmas. My big sister named him Couscous, and I taught him to say, "Hello, darling," which wasn't either of our names. But hey, I was 5. Couscous was my best friend, and I told him everything. I would dream about him saying, "Hello, Polly," almost every night. And though he got out and flew away after a few months, the dreams lingered for a long time. A few years later, my big sister got a kitty, and I insisted she be called Quinoa. Mom and Dad convinced me no one would know how to pronounce that, so we settled on Polenta instead. I didn't like the name because I didn't like the grain, but Mom reminded me she was Sal's cat and not mine, and I had no right to throw a tantrum, despite the fact that Sal had named Couscous Couscous. Polenta was gorgeous but very vocal. If she wasn't meowing because she was hungry, which was usually at 4 a.m. when she was near my bedroom door, she was purring like it was a competitive sport. She disappeared for a week once, and I swore on Santa Claus she came home at night because I could hear meowing, but it turns out she'd been trapped in a garage down the street and I got smacked for fibbing. When I was 10, I read The Horse Whisperer and fell in love with the romantic notion of talking to animals. I would sit with Polenta for an hour at a time, telepathically telling her all about my friends at primary school while she meowed incessantly. Dad told me if I was going to stare at the damn cat, I could feed the damn cat. I tried to feed her polenta, but she didn't care for it. The Davidsons moved in the year 2000 and brought 2 dogs with them, a yapper and a barker. I developed an appreciation for the law this year because Dad said he'd cave their heads in with the shovel if it wasn't illegal. Shortly after they moved in, I discovered I was an animal whisperer. I could hear what they're thinking from within about 50 meters. When they weren't making an actual racket, Rex and Zippo would fill my head. I'd hear a woof woof and burf burf every morning when Mr. Davidson was getting ready for work. I complained about their noise, and Mom said I had a hearing of a hawk. Not quite sure if she got her simile right. When a 12-year-old discovers they have the psychic powers, they don't want to tell their family, but they want to tell someone. I told a friend without demand proof. So, I headed around after soccer practice to speak to the family angelfish. I stared at it. It stared back with its beady eyes and fish mouth. "Nothing," I said. "I don't think it has a brain, but I can hear a possum outside." My friend asked, "What's it saying?" "I don't know. It doesn't speak English. I'm not quite sure what blah, blah, blah means." Naturally, they didn't believe me. Why would they? Why would anyone believe someone who claims to hear animal sounds in their head? And how could I ever prove? A chicken once told me, "Bak, bak, bak." That year, I found it increasingly difficult to concentrate. Once I made a connection with any animal, its voice would come to me whenever I was near it. My walk to school was beginning to sound like feeding time at the zoo. Dozens of birds, cats, dogs, and other creatures were chattering away in my head. An iPod on full blast was about the only thing that helped, but even that only helped so much. Imagine walking to school listening to this. My dog says woof, 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 woof. My cat says meow, 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 meow. And my bird says tweet, 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 tweet. Meh. I was about 15 when I proved it and got in the local paper. Someone's puppy had gotten itself lost and I heard it in a drain. No one really believed me, but the family had already wasted money on an animal psychic and were desperate enough to bother the fire brigade with the rantings of an insane adolescent, as my father was kind enough to put it. I became a local living legend after that, and my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Wiltshire Smith, offered me $50 to find out why her beloved Tabby wasn't coming in at night. I sat down next to Tabby and petted her. She told me, meow, 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 which made very little sense to someone who isn't a cat, but I translated it for Mrs. WSS. She stays inside all day because she's scared of the neighborhood children. You should buy them video games so they spend more time indoors. Oddly enough, this worked perfectly, and all my friends got copies of Halo. People started throwing money at me, left, right, and center after that to fix their animals' problems. A pro jockey offered me $400 to find out why his horse had been so uncooperative over the last few months. Mom drove me to his place, and I locked gazes with Princess Anne Frank. She stared at me with her deep brown, enormous evil eyes. As she looked me in the eyes, she said, "Brr, brr." I didn't like Princess Anne Frank one bit. "Send her to the glue factory," I said without breaking eye contact. "This one's racing days are over. It will haunt me till the day I die." That they actually did it. I was 15 and I didn't know that there'll be consequences for condemning a horse that looked at me funny. It might have been the guilt that they could sense in me or some weird sixth sense thing. But all of a sudden, animals hated me. Birds would swoop wherever I went, screeching as I hurried by. My life was a non-stop symphony of barking dogs. Cats yelled and scratched me, and I always seemed to have ants crawling into my shoes and biting my ankles. I tried to play the horse whisperer, and now my head was filled with screams. Screams of rage and hate and disgust. It was hell. I didn't sleep for a month. I tried to keep it together, but I couldn't get along with anyone anymore. And Mom ended up taking me out of school. She took me to the doctors, the ones near the vet. Animals' voices were filling my head. Roosters, mice, snakes, pigs, lion, roar, hyenas, quack, 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 ribbit, meh, coo. It was intolerable. I tore piles and piles of medical records off the shelves, screaming and covering my ears to drown out the noises. These animals were going to kill me for what I did to Princess Anne Frank. I murdered her. They were going to avenge her. I was going to die. They were going to get me, and I had to get the hell out of there fast. I ran full bolt for the door. They didn't institutionalize me, but the doctor had read about me in the papers and more or less had the neuroleptics on standby. I was better after the whole episode. I don't hear the voices of nearby creatures anymore. Not when I'm awake, at least. You know, I don't believe I'm the schizophrenia that they're treating me as. The drugs affect certain neural pathways, and it's just coincidence that they shout out the whispering. How did they find that popping in the drain? Explain why I got like 20 times the national bee sting average last June. Either way, it's better having my head free from anything else's thoughts. Thanks, enough going on in my human brain. Oh, 1 second. Hello? Yes, it is. Your parakeet is depressed and you want me to talk to him? Sure, I can do that, but it will cost you $200. No problem at all. I'm on my way. Sorry, gotta go.